Indigenous peoples of our area, including the following First Nations with communities that are located in the region that we now know as Metro Vancouver. Those would be the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam. Further, we would like to honor the important place in history occupied by the many territorial keepers of these lands and waters around us since time immemorial. Before I call the meeting to order, I'd like to notice Councillor Bartlett isn't here tonight. He is ill, so he sends his regrets. Call the meeting to order. Approval of the agenda. Recommendation would read.
Sorry, just turning my mic on for the first time.
Sure.
That the agenda be approved as circulated.
Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Public input. Public is permitted to provide comments to council on any items shown on this meeting agenda to entitle applies to speakers.
Right.
Karen, if you could just make sure the blue light's on.
Hi, I'm Karen Palmer, 708 Spencer, and I'm here with my husband Peter Rubin and my son Cassidy Palmer Rubin. So I just wanted to thank council for the opportunity to address you and to thank the village staff for their work on the zoning bylaws that deal with coach houses in response to the request we made back in November of 2022. We have studied the report to council. We have a whiteboard in the kitchen where we've been doing arithmetic for 2 days, and we are still unclear on the relationship between floor area ratio, parcel size, principal dwelling size, and maximum coach house size. So we look forward to Chris Boyd's presentation this evening, which we hope will clarify that. Thank you.
You too.
So does Chris.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on. We have no delegations. The minutes of the regular council meeting held on May 2nd, 2023. The recommendation would read.
That the minutes of the regular council meeting held on May 2nd, 2023 be adopted as circulated.
So we move those minutes. Moved, seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Is there any business arising from those minutes? We'll move on to consent agenda. Anybody want to move any items from the consent agenda? Okay. Could I get someone to move the consent agenda? Move in second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We'll move on to legislative reports, zoning bylaw review, coach houses. Mr. Boyd.
Thank you, Worship. Normally I really enjoy presenting to you, but tonight may not be the most enjoyable as I review this report. So as I go through it, as resident stated earlier, it's extremely complicated. The request seems very straightforward. Could we figure out how big a coach house should be within the village of Anmore in relation to our bylaws? As you can see, there is related to if you pull one string, something else comes loose somewhere else in the bylaws. So it's extremely difficult the way the bylaw is currently written. I've tried to go through the bylaw and pull out the most pertinent pieces of the bylaw in relation to coach houses and by proxy secondary suites because they're kind of intertwined in the definitions and whatnot. So as I go through, please stop me if you have any questions and I will try and answer to the best of my abilities as we go forward here. So in general for the discussion here, coach houses typically are supposed to be, best word to use would be subservient to the main principal dwelling is kind of being the way that the council have kind of seen a coach house in the past, and they've tried to write the bylaw in that fashion. And in the way that some of the wording is now being created within the bylaw, it actually makes it, perhaps coach houses shouldn't even be allowed within Anmore the way some of it's written. And so I think we need to rewrite some of the definitions and redefine what is and isn't allowed through the bylaw to help provide clarity, not only to the public, but to staff as well, because this is something the staff have struggled with a little bit when we get applications for coach houses over what is allowed, what size is allowed, what isn't allowed. So I'd like to, perhaps at the end of the year, have a little bit more direction for us as staff to go away and write something which is perhaps clearer for everyone involved. Okay, so and a really important part of a zoning bylaw or any bylaw is the definitions, and the definitions set what something is and isn't, obviously by the word definition there. And so some of the definitions in relation to coach housing within our bylaw are extremely confusing. The English is perhaps not as clear as it could be, it's convoluted, and they intertwine through the bylaw again. So just to put one of these into perspective. So we have coach house, and I'll just read out what a coach house is supposed to be in code and definition. It means a separate dwelling unit which is completely contained within an accessory building containing bathroom, sleeping, living area and cooking facilities. An area is of a size that is clearly incidental to the size of the principal dwelling unit and shall comply with the requirements of section 6.3 of the bylaw. 6.3 of the bylaw is quite important with the way that it's defined. So one of the first important parts of this definition for coach house, when you review a definition, a section that is bolded out within the bylaw actually refers to a definition within the bylaw as well. So if it is not bolded out, it doesn't mean that it's actually a definition. So as you read this, a coach house, and I'll review about the definition, means a separate dwelling unit which is completely contained within an accessory building. So the definition should just be, it's a building, the way that this is written, but it should be, understand as it's an accessory building. It's detached from the principal dwelling. Okay, so it's just some of these things that are really important to get the definitions correct, and none of the definitions in staff's opinion are perhaps a little bit loose and need to be redefined. So I kind of went through the report. I've got a recommendation for accessory buildings and structures to be rewritten as, again, it's a little convoluted. Secondary suites, I believe, council can provide direction to staff on this, that secondary suites are supposed to be a different type of dwelling unit compared to coach houses. But right now, they're intertwined again within the bylaw, and it would appear that a coach house is kind of seen as a secondary suite. Yeah, in reality, they're two different things. A secondary suite, Councillor Trowbridge?
Secondary suite, as I understand it, is in the main house.
Exactly. Right, that's how a definition of secondary suite should be defined in our bylaw, and that's the way that staff interpret it right now. But as you read the defined definitions, that isn't quite correct the way that they can be read, and that's where I'd like the direction to actually physically separate these two pieces altogether. So we define what a secondary suite is. It's within the principal building, and anything related to a secondary suite is pulled out of anything in relation to a coach house, because section 6.3 of our bylaw is referred to secondary suites, but the second paragraph actually refers to coach houses. And so as you read that, I say, well, is it? Isn't it? And that's what I mean by we need to pull pieces out from other directions and just provide a heading that says coach house. These are the requirements of a coach house. Okay. And another one, we make it extremely difficult to understand the allowable floor area within a unit. So we sometimes refer to it as the FAR. That's the floor area ratio of a lot, and it defines how much of a overall on that building lot, how much building you can actually build. That would include the basement in some pieces, the main floor, the secondary floor, and any of the accessory buildings. So that's the overall amount you're allowed to build. Now, the bylaw has exemptions on what you can and can't have, and it gives you what's called free bonus area, depending on where that area is within the principal dwelling and whatnot. It becomes very complicated again. And the coach house has right now some allowances of, if you have a garage space, you get it discounted from the secondary suite size and overall size. Yet if you do something else, it's included. It becomes again very kind of convoluted and hard to follow. So there's a recommendation to tidy up the floor area ratio, gross floor area. Okay. So on top of all the definitions, there's a number of sections within the bylaw, and part 6 is called specific use regulations, and this dictates what can and can't be done generally within a zone, and it gives some more definitions within this zone. So 6.3 is the one that really provides some problematic areas in definitions. 6.3 is secondary suites. I'll just read out 6.3.1 for everyone. Not more than one secondary suite or coach house shall be permitted on a parcel of land, except for parcels in RS1 zone with one principal building that are equal to or larger than 4,047. That's 1 acre, just so everyone knows in square meterage. Where one secondary suite and one coach house are permitted, so long as the combined floor area of the secondary suite and coach house does not exceed 180 square meters. So just within this one piece, it kind of says, well, you're not allowed more than one secondary suite or coach house. Yet then later on it says, oh, you can have a coach house and a secondary suite. So which is it? Are we allowing just one secondary suite and one coach house, or are we saying we're allowed, on an RS1 lot, you're allowed a principal dwelling, a secondary suite, and a coach house? So I think, again, this definition could be written in a fashion that everyone can understand what you are and are not allowed, because right now, I don't think it's as clear as it perhaps could be. So the next piece is a secondary suite shall not have a floor area that exceeds the lesser of 90 square meters or 40% of the floor area of the principal dwelling. So this is one of the comments that has been raised a number of times to staff, and I believe the proponent that came forward in 2022 was arguing this isn't exactly fair, as in you are, what's the best word? You're doing a disservice to the allowable size of a coach house if you have a reasonable sized home on your lot at the way that it is written right now. So, in other words, if you build to the maximum allowable floor area on your dwelling, you are getting a bonus that you can now build a reasonable sized coach house. Yet if you have a reasonable sized principal dwelling, it basically means you're only allowed to build a micro house, coach house on your lot. And so I think this is where a lot of the problems start getting introduced on what do we want to see within Anmore? Do we want to see that you're allowed a reasonable sized coach house, full stop, no matter what the size of the dwelling is on your lot? So that's something the council perhaps could provide a little bit more clarification coming forward. So there's that piece. So now here's the next problem that is now introduced. Under the heading of secondary suite 6.3, we now have a definition of a coach house. So is a coach house a secondary suite? I ask it rhetorically because I'm confused myself when I get to this point in the bylaw. And I'll just read out the definition of a coach house. It means a separate dwelling unit which is completely contained within an accessory building containing bathroom, sleeping, blah, 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 blah. And it goes on again. And shall comply with all the requirements under 6.3, which again refers to secondary suites, which means, do I have to comply with everything regarding secondary suites when it's a coach house? I think the answer is no, perhaps. I'm putting words in people's mouths there. Okay, and then finally, 6.3.3, for parcels less than 4,047 square meters, a coach house shall not have a floor area that exceeds 100 square meters. For parcels equal to larger than 4,047, a coach house shall not have a floor area that exceeds 130 square meters. For purpose of calculating floor area of a coach house, if there is a garage area in an accessory building containing the coach house, the garage area shall not be included in the calculation of the floor area of the coach house, but the area of the garage will be included in the calculation of the floor area for the necessary accessory buildings. So there's a circular motion that goes on in this paragraph that by the time I get to it, I try not to giggle because I'm confused, because I have to reread the first sentence and I get to the last sentence again and I get into a time warp as I reread it. So I think there could be a better definition and clarity within that paragraph as well. And so I suppose one of the crux of the matter here is trying to figure out what does council want to see in relation to a coach house? What size of coach house do we want to allow our residents to build within their lot of land? And so I kind of just took an example here of one way.
No,
okay. That I kind of just put a ratio together here, that because we don't always have lots which are 1 acre defined as 4,047. Sometimes we have a little bit less, sometimes we have a little bit more. You know, the previous part of the bylaw said, well, if you're over 1 acre, we can give you some more bonus size of your coach house. So, you know, it doesn't seem quite right. If you're at 4,047, forgive me, which number I'm going to pull here, you're allowed 100 square meters, but if you're 4,048, you suddenly get 30 square extra meters, just because your lot was 1 square meter bigger, right? It seems a bit of a strange way of going about it. So maybe a sliding ratio might be a way to deal with that. And I just put in here a random ratio example here of you work out the overall allowable FAR on your plot of land and then multiplied it by 15% to give you a size of an allowable coach house altogether. So that would mean you don't have to build all of the FAR on your land. It would just be the entitlement of how big a coach house you could have. So let's just say you only built, I don't know, let's pick a number. You built a principal dwelling that was 300 square meters. You could still build a coach house that was 151 square meters at that point in time. So it's just a way of looking at it that way. And now, one of the pieces that I know has been important to council and something that we'd have to review and tackle again, but I think there's a better way of doing this, is that In the past, there has been, it happens in lots of jurisdictions, where someone will build a coach house and they will attach garage space to that coach house. It seems reasonable. People want to park their vehicles within that space. Now, what happens over time is that sometimes that garage space now gets converted into livable space, and so that's why there needs to be some kind of guardrail here to try and limit that conversion space, because otherwise what happens is people build a 4-car garage with a coach house contained and then be like, oh, well, I'm going to change this 4-car garage into a secondary suite. And so I have a coach house and a secondary suite and my principal dwelling. And is it correct in the bylaws? No, it's kind of wrong within the bylaws from the start, but it's very hard to regulate once someone has built something when we go through a building process, because not everyone always does the right thing and comes in with a building permit process. So that's why this garage piece is in there of how do we deal with a parking situation, yet trying to limit people from converting it after the fact. So that's why this garage piece is in there. I understand why it's there, and again, there can be a little better way of dealing with that piece. So then kind of the next piece of this bylaw refers to the RS1 zone, which is primarily the majority of Anmore is 1 acre lots. And there are some definitions within the RS1 which don't always seem to marry up together with what I think the expectations of past councils have had. So the first part is the purpose. This zone is intended to provide land solely for the purpose of one family residential housing as the principal use. The sentence is construed in a way that implies that only one family residential is allowed as the principal use. This could be rewritten to provide clarity. So the reason I write that is, it sounds like on this piece of land you're only allowed one family on it. But however, a lot of people want to build a primary residence house and then have a coach house for a second family to live on this property. But if you read the purpose, it's like, well, that isn't quite meeting the purpose at this point in time. So perhaps we should be revisiting the purpose piece here of rewriting it to, the zone is intended to provide land for the primary use of residential family dwelling units. So then you can say that it's for residential use only. However, you can have more than one family on this plot of land. So it's just another way of thinking about it. Moving on. So this now gets into 9.1.3, maximum building size and height, and then there's a table within the bylaw. And so it reads, principal buildings and accessory buildings, maximum number 1. Now I want to just stress that it says principal buildings and accessory buildings, maximum number 1. Okay, so it says to me that you're allowed one of these things, the way that it's written, okay? And it says a maximum FAR of 0.25 and a maximum building height of 10. Okay, seems pretty straightforward. But the next line down then says accessory buildings and structures, maximum number 2. So one of the problems we have as staff is that when we review it, if you're the approving officer or an officer reviewing it, a person has to, sounds bad, it sounds strange, has to apply to all the rules under the bylaw. Well, I'm not too sure how you apply this rule when many of our residents already have 2 units already on them, but we're saying you're only allowed 1 and someone comes in for a coach house. So in reality, we're supposed to reject all of them because you already have 1 principal unit and you can't meet both of these definitions within this table. So again, that should be clarified and cleaned up. And also the table refers to just building size and height. It doesn't actually correspond to saying, well, how many buildings are actually allowed within this zone. Okay, moving on. So I can make a recommendation within the report that perhaps we can rewrite this table for clarity and includes reference to coach housing. So again, the maximum gross floor area of the principal building and all accessory buildings on the parcel shall not exceed a floor area ratio of 0.25, except that, 1, in the case where all buildings are sited on the parcel in such a manner that all the setbacks of the buildings are increased by 1.5 metres beyond that which are required pursuant to section 9.1.4 for every 152 square metres of additional floor area. So what this means is you could live on a large plot of land in Anmore, and if you move your house further away from the side of your yard, you make the house bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't personally know why this is within the bylaw. People can basically build a really large house if they just give up some more setbacks and go more vertical. They have to stay within the height allowance, but what it does is that it starts incentivizing home builders to build boxes that just are square and go high, right? Which is okay if that's what you like, but typically what we try and do within zoning bylaws is to try and create it in a way that you don't just have these utilitarian boxes, that we want to see different definitions in floor heights and whatnot. So that's, again, I'd be saying I think we need to change this, or perhaps even remove this bonus area that we provide within the bylaw. That's something that council can look at. Okay, sorry, I shouldn't laugh. This is the next piece that it always gets me chuckling. Notwithstanding this restriction, a principal building with a gross floor area of not more than 232 square meters will be permitted on any parcel. So no matter, I've just said to you, you're allowed a ratio of 0.25 of the overall lot area. This piece of the bylaw now says, I don't care what any of that says, you're only allowed 232 square meters. Which to me was like, well, why did we have all of this previously within the bylaw if you're now going to restrict the 232.4 square meters? So perhaps this should be removed as well. Sorry if I'm boring you, or if I stop me, whatever you want.
Chris, we know that this is flawed.
Yeah.
And you've outlined in many instances.
Yeah.
So you're wanting council to give you some direction in regards to fixing it.
Yeah.
But you also want to get some indication of what council is looking for.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop you there.
Woo!
For all of us. I'm going to stop you. I'm going to just give you an overview of what, it's unfortunate that Councillor Weber isn't here, because Councillor Weber, Councillor Trowbridge and myself, we worked pretty extensively on this when we wanted to revisit the carriage house theory and practicality, and that was probably, I'm going to say, 7 to 8 years ago.
We wanted to increase its size.
Yeah, we wanted to make it actually, and I'm going to use square feet because I'm old school.
Yeah.
So what our thought was, and what we tried to convey to the planner at the time, which obviously did not work, and we're in this situation, is the existing one is that an RS1, so 1 acre parcel, would have a little bit of a privilege, and that would be that they can build a carriage house. The initial carriage house size at that point in time, and I'm just rounding things up, was about 1,000 square feet. And we heard from many people that just isn't quite big enough. I know in downtown Vancouver terms it's very big, but in Anmore terms it wasn't. It didn't give enough storage. It didn't allow a family to either downsize to or to start out to. So we worked with some numbers and we got it up to, and I believe the final total that we agreed on was about 1,450 square feet. So it added an extra washroom and an extra bedroom, is what we kind of thought. But with that, we had some problems. We had problems with the existing carriage houses that were in the village, because if they were attached to a house, they weren't being governed by the size. People were, after occupancy, they were expanding them and making them much larger. They were also adding additional suites, and again, remember, it's something really important that as we live here on septics, a carriage suite is constituted as 2 bedrooms, and therefore that is part of the gauge in the measuring as to the size of a septic system that you put into a house. Whether the carriage suite only had 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms, it was still gauged in the design as a 2 bedrooms to be added to the load. We also didn't want 2 suites in a resident, because then we have another problem that septic systems were not being designed for that, which again you have to be followed within, and as well we were having parking issues, which again in some of the neighborhoods. So the other thing that we have since, even the addition that we did from that initial conversation about carriage houses and making it to 1,450 feet, was the fact that we thought that we should allow suites in houses, whether they don't have to be in an RS1, they could be in a half acre. Because, believe it or not, everybody's done it. We can't police it. We might as well embrace it and make sure that as we move forward, the septic fields are designed to be able to facilitate it, and the parking is there to facilitate it. I can tell you, for example, Ravenswood was not supposed to have any suites in it. Parking was limited to 2 stalls. I drive by through Ravenswood almost every day right now, and there's cars parked on the streets that aren't supposed to be there. And there are suites in the residents that aren't supposed to be there. So there's septic systems, and I've heard this from, the Glendon felt that the septic systems are failing because they can't handle that. The other big thing, which Chris also alluded to, is that we had some clever designers that were building the 1,000 square foot carriage house on top of a 4-car garage, and then converting a portion of that into a livable space, which again took a 2-bedroom to a 4-bedroom, and that was problematic. The challenge is defining all those floor areas, as Chris has said, and we're going to have to do some work on that. The thing that the Palmers brought up, we never even thought that was a possibility here in Anmore, to be quite honest. So when they reached out to me and said, hold on, I can't even build up to the 1,450 square feet because my existing house is too small, it is a bit of an anomaly here in Anmore, to be quite honest. But it is not what the intent was. The intent was to allow downsizing and younger families to come into a substantial size. And you know, as a municipality, we have to be cautious of, again, the septic systems, parking, and also, you know, we have requirements under the fire code as well. So that was the intent, and I just, you know, there's obviously a lot of work that needs to be done here, and I think it's work that certainly misses the intent that we initially wanted to have happen many years ago. And you know, I thank you, Chris, for taking us on. This is it's not going to happen overnight, but it is certainly going to solve some. You know, we certainly have to be very cognizant of the parking and all those other safety issues as well. So I'll open that for council to provide any comment to Chris in regards to, you know, some of the challenges that they see as well. Doug, or Councilor Richardson, do you have anything? Or?
I have lots.
Okay.
But can go first? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So, first, Chris.
Push your button.
Chris.
Yeah.
One of the things that drives me nuts about the bylaws is that the definitions don't carry across different bylaws. So we have a building bylaw, and a structure is different in the building bylaw than it is in the zoning bylaw, which causes all sorts of issues. I don't know if anybody's looked at it, but you're not allowed to pitch a tent in your yard without paying a permit fee in the building bylaw, because a tent, like a simple little tent, is a structure in that thing. And I think that all has to be cleaned up so it's all aligned. What always perplexes me about Anmore is there's kind of this look and feel aspect. You know, it used to be semi-rural, and the streets look semi-rural. But I don't know how a 10,000 square foot monster is semi-rural and a 2,000 square foot house is somehow against that. The other thing we never do is we don't do any architectural requirements. Ravenwood, very uniform. It was designed that way by the builders. The rest of Anmore, people build boxes, people build bungalows, they build anything they want, and it all jumbles together. But this aspect of a carriage house is somehow, we want a big house and then a little tiny structure. And I don't see from a housing perspective at all why that makes any sense. If you can build 12,000 square feet, use the setbacks, why can't you have 4 2,500 square foot suites in that same structure? Yes, I realize it's a fourplex. The septic field is based on bathrooms and bedrooms. So if you can put them all in there and the septic field passes, I think it should be go. And I think we have to do that from housing affordability, young person kind of things. We have to relax this. I don't see any reason why you can't have a suite in a house, even in a half-acre zoning, and have a carriage house. Or even have 2 suites in your carriage house if you want to have the septic field and capability to do that. I don't understand why you can have, like a CD zone, 2 6,000 square foot houses side by side, but on an RS1, you can't have that. You can have a 6,000 square foot house and then a 1,500 square foot coach house. The look and feel to me is exactly the same, whether it's side by side on one lot or side by side on another lot. More so, you can overrule the whole frickin' thing with the breezeway, right? And that's what people do. So this aspect of this look and feel really has to be thought out. So I'm in complete favor of reducing the requirements. I think you should be able to have a coach house that's near equal to size of your main house. If not, you do the breezeway thing. Now, I know for you guys it's hard because there's a creek in the way, but it doesn't, from a look and feel point of view, it would look like 2 lots. So I'm for suites, even 2 suites per house, if it's set up the right way with the right septic and right design and happen to be. I think that's what we should be going in. I'm not opposed to duplexes. I think that should be some part of Anmore. They took them out a long time ago because I call them Mario, but Mario built this thing that most people know looks like a hotel, And that was 2 duplexes with 2 huge suites, and each duplex was essentially a 4-plex. But from an affordability point of view and a long-term resident point of view, I think that's the way to go. And as a perspective, Vancouver allows duplexes on a 40-foot lot, with each having a suite, and you can have a laneway house. So the density there is capable, but that's with the sewer system. So we have this constraint, but it's nowhere near pushed at all whatsoever. So I'm okay with that. And likewise, on a coach house, you know, if you have a garage, it didn't count, or it does count, but if it's a carport, it doesn't count. So people build a much bigger structure with a carport and not. And do I care if they fill it in? If their septic field supports the system and they make it slightly bigger, look and feel whether it's a sliding door that goes like this or a door that goes like this, I don't care. And I don't think the majority of the residents will care. Like there's this strange aspect that somehow we have this unofficial control over what things look like. So 25% FAR for lots, fine. Half acre, 30%, fine. This 90-meter requirement on a suite in a house, I think is silly. I don't see why it can't be bigger. Likewise, the 40%, I don't see why that 40% makes any sense. And I don't see this 180 meters squared for suite and coach house makes any sense whatsoever. I think all those should be addressed on what can be supported comfortably, looks good, septic fields included, in Anmore. And I think we should go that path and work that out.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the FAR is still a ruling piece. I want to see larger carriage houses. I don't like the penalty of someone building a smaller home, so then they restrict the carriage house to the point that they can't have their kids live there, in-laws. That's just not reasonable. But I think there should be a maximum size to a carriage house. I don't agree with 2 6,000 square foot homes on an acre, because now you're penalizing all the people that have paid for infill in order to separate their properties and have 2 full-size principal residences. You're also penalizing developers who have to pay CACs in order to have a 5,000 square foot house on a half acre and so on to retain that look. So I'm not in favor of 2 full-size homes on a 1 acre lot, but I think the guiding principle should be FAR. So if you've got an acre, that's about 11,000 square feet, give or take. If you have an 11,000 square foot home, maybe that's the end of it. Or there's a maximum size carriage house, the coach house, I guess we're calling them, that you can attach to that. And if your house goes down in size, if you have a 6,000 square foot home, then you get a bigger one to a maximum of whatever that number is. That's my main principle.
So, you know, Chris, you have a lot of work to do here, and you've heard some feedback. So rather than debate it any further, I hope we've been able to give you enough direction to be able to prepare a report to bring back to council.
Yeah, can I ask just some clarifying questions
Sure,
for me as I go forward? So one of the questions I would have is, can you just provide clarity for me where secondary suites should be allowed? Should they be allowed only in RS1, or would we allow them in infill and CD zones? Or should they, do you have any thoughts on where you'd like to allow secondary suites?
We're going to disagree.
That's fine, that's healthy.
I think wherever you have off-street parking,
Okay.
and capacity on the septic system,
Yeah.
that a suite should be allowed. So I'm not stuck with RS1 single acre as a minimum for a suite. If I'm thinking of Bellaterra has a bunch of half acre lots in it. If they can park cars off street, if the lot's the right size and they can get the cars off the street, I'm fine with that. So ample parking, ample sewage control, that works for me.
I think my only comment on top of that would be that I think there should be a premium for a 1 acre lot to be having a separated carriage house is my take on it.
So can you clarify what you mean by a premium?
For 1 acre RS1, 1 acre lots for carriages. I think suites are fine in properties smaller than that, in the principal residence, but I would be more of the adage to keep carriage houses as a kind of a thing that.
So coach house only on RS1?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Right. Okay.
The premium, no.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Maybe wrong word.
I would have to say I disagree with that. With respect to suites, we have them in Bellaterra, we have them in Cordovato. We probably have them illegally in a bunch of places. I know many houses that have 2 suites. So it goes on. I think if you make things easier to do it, then you have less illegal, and I think less illegal is better. We already have rules on cars, maximum 6, et cetera, et cetera. With respect to carriage houses, it's half an acre. If you can do some ratio of, you get a bigger carriage house on a 1 acre, fair enough. But, you have it on 1 acre but not on 0.8, or you have it on 0.81 but not on 0.5, it makes no sense to me. Like the idea here is to make housing more affordable and more livable for multiple people, ages, groups, etc. Age in place, young families. And the more housing you have, the better it works. The competition is like an 800 square foot condo or 700 square foot condo in a tower. So 1,000 square foot on a half acre carriage house is brilliant from a perspective. So I think we should be more liberal with what we allow.
Can I ask, I suppose, a question towards, first off, one definition. Oh, do we want to call it carriage houses? Because that seems to be prevailing when we want to call it carriage houses. Or I'm rewriting it so you can have carriage houses or you can have coach houses. But pick one. Okay. But more importantly, I suppose the question would be this: if we wanted to have coach houses on different sizes of lots, let's play devil's advocate. We would allow it on half-acre lots. Okay. Would the important part be that you see a principal dwelling, and if they had a coach house, say, towards the rear of the lot and you didn't see it, would that be an acceptable way of looking at it? Or is it because you see 2 principal dwellings on 1 lot?
We don't normally have back access to the properties, that's the problem.
For sure, but I suppose the comment would be that it's on the same common lot. You don't have easements or anything like that, because it's one single identity lot, right? So people could have a driveway that goes to the back that you wouldn't even see it. So I suppose that's just someone would be able to do it. Someone would be able to do it.
I would ask the fire chief on that because I think he would have a problem with that. Okay.
I was going to say this, and I think the first thing to do is to ask the fire chief. I personally have no objection to that. If we maintain setbacks so that from the street things look visually separated, we don't start to get a big house, little house, and all
Yes.
crammed together. If there's an elongated lot,
Yep.
exactly the size of my iPad,
Yes.
and the main house is here and the carriage houses, breezeway or drive past, I have no problem with that. But I would probably provide an acre with the opportunity for a larger one than I would for the half acre. The reason I say that is permeable soil. You want to be careful with that FAR. It's there for more reasons than aesthetics.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to be flexible, but flexible with some clear parameters. So I agree with part of Councillor Richardson in that you can't distinguish between RS1 and a smaller lot, but we need to be mindful of the spacing and what Councillor Trowbridge said about big house, little house, big house, little house. So I like the idea of a sliding scale. I think that works. I think that's all. I just wanted, that's nothing else to add.
So you're good with everything then?
Through the mayor, I think it would be helpful. The recommendation is, to amend the zoning bylaw in accordance with the recommendations. but I think it would be helpful for staff. I'm hearing some agreements on some areas and not on other areas. So in terms of actually preparing a bylaw for council's consideration, I think that we would want to get clear direction by way of an amendment to the staff recommendation, providing clarification on such items such as the coach house comments allowing only on RS1 or on different size lots, you know, with of course the orientation and getting comments back from the fire chief, just so staff knows one way or the other how to prepare the actual bylaw based on that direction, instead of just the recommendations included in the report.
You
Does
kind of
that
lost.
make sense?
No, I'm sorry.
So for example, Councillor Richardson had a differing opinion regarding the, Mayor McCune, your comment on the coach house, I believe, was only on RS1. Councillor Richardson made a comment that he would be supportive of coach houses being allowed on different sizes of lots, not just RS1. So I think and we heard that from Councillor Carr and Councillor Trowbridge as well. So I think it would just be helpful to staff to put any of those sort of missing pieces into the recommendation so that we know and that council has voted on what direction we want staff to prepare the bylaw. And then of course the bylaw will come back before council consideration.
I don't think we need to get into that level of detail from what we have in front of us right now. What we have right in front of us, to use a word, would be a mess. You know, you read it, Councillor Trowbridge read it, I read it, and I'm like, this just, so we have a lot of work just to get to a thing with and then to add some variables that we've talked about here. I think it'd be a wholesome discussion to bring back something with those variables that we've talked about right now, because I'm sure Councillor Weber is going to have a bunch of variables as well to be able to venture in. So
could I make,
you have enough, I believe, right now to be able to get a good start on this. This isn't going to happen in 1 or 2 meetings. This is going to be an evolution. You bringing something forward.
yeah. So how I think we need to amend the recommendation then, because the recommendation is saying that I'll bring back a new bylaw.
Yeah.
Perhaps what I need to do is kind of a similar version of what I've done now, a new proposal with informational package, which says if we do this, this is how it would affect the lot. But if we change this, this is how we would affect the lot.
100%.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The original recommendation.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Just one question, where does, I know this is way in the weeds, but septic, so if you're looking at a property that's been here for 25, 30 years and they want to do something that they weren't normally allowed, how, we're gonna have to get into those details.
Yeah, so we would review that as a building permit requirement of, is your septic system up to the task of what you're asking for through the bylaw?
Councillor Richardson.
The original one back in November was bring potential solutions to address issues arising from coach house size restrictions. So I think if you taper it to something to address and investigate size issues for couch houses and suites and number of them, it gives you kind of a direction to kind of go. And whatever new bylaw comes out will fix the twisted nature of the current one, I would hope. Because I think that's kind of the gist, and I think that's what the Palmer wanted, right? Was like, what does it look like in the future? And I think they probably want their answer sooner rather than later, if possible. Would be my guess.
I'm terrible at writing recommendations. I'll lean on the corporate officer or the CEO for the recommendation piece maybe.
I think it's very basic, just to go back and revisit coach houses, suites, quantity throughout the different zoning that we have currently in the village, and make sure that they coexist through the building bylaw as well, and make sure that it basically makes sense and bring it back to us with some options that we'll debate. Right now it's all over the,
Yeah.
you have nowhere to start.
Yeah.
So.
Let's throw Ron under the bus.
Corporate officer.
How would you like to be put right on the spot?
Yeah, I have that staff be directed to further investigate coach houses, suites, and quantities in all zones throughout the village and report back to council.
Perfect. Could I get someone to move that? Moved. Seconded. Any further discussion? See none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Bishop.
Boyd. Thank everybody for listening to me.
Normally I like the sound of my own voice, not tonight.
Wow. Okay, we'll move on to 9B, council meeting calendar amendments. Recommendation, Michelle.
That staff be directed to amend the 2023 regular council meeting calendar to reflect the following meeting dates for June and July. June 20th, no meeting. June 27th, regular council meeting. July 4th, no meeting. And July 18th, regular council meeting.
So to move that, moved, seconded, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, carried unanimously. Appointment of corporate officer, Ms. Albright.
Thank you. So I am very excited to have our new manager of corporate services here at the village. This is her second meeting. She was at the committee of the whole meeting last week, but this is her first regular council meeting. And we're very happy to have her on board. Michelle has extensive experience in local government in many different areas, including small communities, corporate office, communications, community services. So we're very lucky to have her on board with that wide breadth of knowledge. And the recommendation this evening would be that Rhonda shall be appointed as the corporate officer for the Village of Anmore pursuant to Section 148 of the Community Charter.
So to move that, moved, seconded, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, carried unanimously. Congratulations. We'll now move on to items of committee of the whole, BC Growing Communities Grant Funding. Michelle?
So we're looking for a motion from council based on a recommendation that came from the committee of the whole. So the recommendation is that staff be directed to report back on options for allocation of the Growing Community Grant of $1.73 million in the following areas: public works yard improvements for equipment and vehicles, enhancements to Anmore Community Hub and surrounding area, Ravenswood Drive realignment and tree management of area, wildfire protection initiatives including fire smart principles, potential bylaw updates and vegetation management including trail improvements, and water system surface planning.
Need someone to move that? Moved. Seconded, any discussion?
Just one quick point for the benefit of the audience. My understanding is these are not in priority order, they're just numbered.
Yeah.
Correct?
Call the question, all those in favor? Opposed, carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to the mayor's report. Got a few things I just wanted to bring up. This Sunday, June 11th, is Belcarra Day. Down at Belcarra Park, where it's supposed to be great. So just to make note of that. Last week I was at FCM in Toronto. Never been before. It was an interesting thing dealing with a lot of the bigger communities. We also attended, several of us on this council, myself, Councillor Trowbridge, Councillor Weber, were at the May Day Parade in Poco, which was an amazing success, amazing weather, thousands of people out. Mayor and council and Port Coquitlam was so appreciative of us coming down with some collector cars, and we've done this as an annual tradition, and it's really nice. They are. I'm going to say it's probably been 8 years. We enjoy breakfast in the morning, and we hang out with Emma Lake Farnworth, MP Ron McKinnon, a bunch of people, and a lot of the Port Coquitlam councillors. We just approved one of our new things, which was the May 30th Committee of the Whole, which is where we have just a real broad discussion about some of the things and spending some of the $1.73 million. Michelle, I forgot to, at public input, you had an email. So if you could read that right now, I forgot that we received an email for public input, and so I'm just going to get it right out right now. I apologize for that.
The comment was from Rod Rempel at 12 Maple Court, Anmore, BC. I would like to suggest that some of these monies be used for pavement replacement for some of our neighborhood streets. I am particularly concerned and embarrassed of the condition of Alderway Maple Court. These two streets are an embarrassment to our village. Countless repairs and lack of maintenance have left these two streets a complete mess. I would suggest that using some of this funding for repaving these two streets would be an excellent improvement in our community.
Thank you. The trustees, myself, Trustee Trowbridge and Trustee Weber attended the Saskatchewan Fire Department trustee meeting this past Thursday. And yeah, it was a good meeting, furthering things along. The property taxes have been sent out, and I just wanted to compliment Ms. Martin, Head of Financial Services, and those who put it together, but the accompanying sort of sheet in regards to where tax dollars go is that almost half of all our tax dollars go into schools and other different agencies. So we sort of limit to our catchment of that is about 28%, is it? Or?
I believe our catchment was 40%.
Oh, 40, with the,
that
with
included
the
our capital.
Yeah, with the yeah. So, excellent job, excellent job. We also, this year for the first time, outlined the costs, because some people don't realize that although we have a volunteer fire department, that there are costs associated with it that were in our budget. So we actually differentiated two line items. One was for capital and one was for operations. And they totaled, I think on average, about $600 a year for our fire department, which in other municipalities is upwards of about 20% of their overall budget. So amazing work on by our fire department. Bringing me to my last thing, which I'm extremely concerned about, and that is the wildfires that we are facing right now. 2 hours before my meeting, I got an email saying that my cabin, which is up at Hemlock Mountain, is under evacuation alert. There are fires starting up everywhere, and I know when we met with the fire department, Jay is having sleepless nights. It is concerning what's going on right now. We recently had an arborist go through the village talking about the plight of our hemlock trees and some of our trees, and it is not good. 80% of the 2-acre parcel, which is at the end of Ravenswood, which neighbors right along Sunnyside Road, has to come down. It's dangerous. They're dying. You know, this is probably the effect of the heat dome that happened 3 years ago. But it's dangerous. The arborist actually commented that when going around and walking through that area, that she said the ground conditions related to that of the 3rd week in August. And we're in the 1st week of June. You know, we love our trees, but I'll tell you something, this is getting to the point that we are very concerned as a council. You know, do we start, you know, is this a new reality that we start cutting swaths, taking trees down in swaths to make sure that we have a fire break in case something breaks out? You know, there was a fairly significant fire that happened in Belcarra, and luckily we were able to get enough crews together and with Metro Vancouver to be able to put it out fairly quickly. Jay was worried about it, Jay Sharp was worried, because if the wind had gone the other way. So we have a big, you know, having all these trees around us is concerning, and I'll tell you, I'm very concerned about that right now. So, pass it on to the councillor's report.
Thank you, Mayor McEwen. A couple of things. The first one on my list is a meeting that I attended last week, Healthier Community Partnership, and it follows what Mayor McEwen was just saying. Speaking about, we met for an hour and a half, and most of the conversation was around extreme heat, smoke, and fire, how it impacts the community. More meetings coming on that. Again, quite crucial for us living in this beautiful area that we live in. I also had a meeting today, a Fraser Health meeting that Mayor McEwen and I were to attend together, but he wasn't able to make it. That meeting was myself and the executive director for health services in New West and the Tri-Cities, as well as the community health specialist for the public health population. We spoke about Eagle Ridge Hospital emergency and the changes that are going on there, and how business is good since they opened the new emerge. I don't know if that's good news or bad news, but they're definitely busier than they were, and staff although short-staffed there like everyone else, they're doing a fabulous job. Also, I had a meeting with the Hillside Group. We had our committee of the whole, which we spoke of a little earlier tonight. I think I told you all at our last regular council meeting that I was excited to participate in McCabby Day, and I was angling for the takeout window. That didn't work out well for me. Councillor Glenn Pollock with the City of Poco got it. We're still working through our issues on that, but I'm very happy to say that we did raise $3,000 for the Tri-Cities Homelessness and Housing Task Group. And I also wanted to mention there was something I read in the latest issue of the Anmore Times about the work that I do with the task group, that all 100% of the money, we don't get a lot of, we don't get a lot of donations, but I do a lot of work just being an advocate for the unhoused in the community. Everything that we do and any of the funds that we get, 100% of them stay in the Tri-Cities. Nothing goes to Burnaby, Surrey. Those municipalities have city offices that handle the homeless issue. We are just kind of grassroots organization organizing everything for all three communities. So it's a lot of work, but it's very, very worthwhile and needed work. There's a few items in the information item section of the agenda today to point out. One, I want to say thank you to the Coquitlam Search and Rescue for sending their recap of services and support this past year. We do some funding for them, as well as the 2 letters regarding housing and how things are changing in Metro Vancouver, and it's starting to trickle into us. So I think it's a bit of a sign of the times with things coming up. And the last thing I wanted to mention, this just came through today. I flipped it to Ms. Ulrich and Ms. Shell, a new age-friendly grant that's coming out that I'd like to see if we can explore for when the Village Hub is open. The Bring Back Dementia Cafe, Dementia-Friendly Cafe, something like that. I'm not sure what the parameters are. I just flipped it over to you and we can look at that. We have a few months to get that in, but I think that would be worthwhile. And we're doing pretty good at getting grants, so hopefully our work will continue.
Good. Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Yeah, so it's been a while now. About a month or so ago, I went to the Sasamat Outdoor Center. They had a meeting to discuss the removal of the dam that Imperial Oil built. Mayor McKeown was there, Council Webwood was there as well, or were you there as the chair of the Parks of Metro? Or
I think I was a bit of both.
Okay. The interesting thing about that, and my guess is that the dam's going to be removed and not be replaced, is the ownership is exceptionally complicated. But Port Moody owns the land, Metro Vancouver has the park, and the water is Crown. And it's hard to know that anybody's going to do anything, so my guess is nobody's going to be willing to pay for another dam, so it'll just be removed, and that will be that. The shocking thing to me is nobody's bothered to figure out where the new lake shore will be, and I think all you need is a canoe and a depth finder, and you could have it done in an hour. I also went to the Port Moody Council meeting, because I wanted to see what they're going to do with Coronation Park, because that is a fascinating thing for me, what's going to happen on that corner. End story, 2,665 units and 12.25 acres. There's some density for you, but it's a good opportunity to think about density in different ways. The most striking thing from that for me, which potentially could be in Anmore's future, is with all that, there is no affordable below market housing planned, which is striking. They may bring it into the future. I've also been following David Eby, Premier Eby, and his targeted communities, of which Anmore missed the first cut of 10, but then they did release the full naughty list of 47, and from Metro Vancouver communities, municipalities, and villages, everyone is on the list, so I don't feel so special anymore. The only people not on the list is Bowen Island, Electoral Area A, which I had to look up, and Tsawwassen First Nations. So it's not a particularly targeted thing, it seems to be everybody. And the last thing, if you haven't read the Anmore Times, the Weinbergs are leaving Anmore. This is a very sad thing for me. And I'd like to know what Anmore can do to sort of honor the fact that Anmore wouldn't be here without them. So if you have any ideas, please send them off to me. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it brief. I was at May Day and a fire trustee as well. But one thing that was striking, and I'm not sure everyone knows, but we have a designation in Anmore that is conservation recreation, and 60% of Anmore's land mass falls within that. So when you talked about trees and doing things relative to protecting people and their homes, we have the vast majority of our land that is untouched natural trees. So we have the opportunity to protect ourselves without harming nature to any significant extent.
Chief?
Chief.
Chief Administrative Officer. Sorry.
Thank you.
It's been a long day.
Yes. So since the last council meeting, we were very happy to receive some more fantastic news about some grant funding. So we continue to be grateful to other levels of government for providing these opportunities to our small village. We received $375,000 towards Spirit Park improvements, and that project will nicely align with the hub grand opening and some improvements in that area. As well, we did receive $30,000 for our new emergency operations center, and what that money will be used for is furnishings and fixtures and AV equipment and that type of thing that will greatly upgrade our ability to respond and open up our EOC in case of an emergency. So since early 2022, that brings us up to almost $6 million in grant money that we've received. So kudos to everybody at the village and council for continuing to advocate on behalf of the village to those other senior levels of government, because those dollars make a big difference in our community. So that's great news. Just a reminder to everybody that there is currently a campfire ban in effect, so no campfires at all. We will continue to update as Chief Sharp gives us updates on notifications, but for now there's no campfires. We had some service interruptions again last week with GFL, so staff and council understands that this is bothersome to the community, and I just want to let everybody know that we are working through and communicating with GFL on ways to improve service. There are several issues that we're waiting to hear back timelines and details on, but we're told that there's new trucks on order. The totes that the village has are not the same size totes that get picked up with all of their other trucks in their fleet. So the arms are not able to pick up. Our totes are what's called a European tote as opposed to a North American tote, and the arms are different. It's all very complicated, but we're told that new equipment is coming, and we're in continued discussions on ways to improve that service and also improve our communications out to the village and make sure that GFL is receptive to communication from our residents when they're calling in. So we'll be reporting more out on that. And lastly, I would like to just announce here, as I had previously let council know, that the village staff has received the OCP amendment application from Icona regarding the Anmore South lands. So what that means right now is staff is in the preliminary stages of reviewing the application. We'll be communicating with the proponent if there's anything that we think is missing or further information is needed. And then at that point, once staff has conducted that review, it will be brought forward to council to introduce the application. So at this point, we haven't shared with council the application or the community. We're in the review stage. What I can say though is that the application is generally consistent with what we have seen as presented in the open house that Icona recently had, and hopefully in the coming weeks that we'll be able to have some information to present to council, and certainly we'll be communicating out with the community at that time as well in advance of that. Thank you.
Good, thank you. We have some few information items, committee of the whole meeting minutes and general correspondence. I'll now just open up the public question period. Public is permitted 2 minute time applies to speakers. We can just kind of keep it operational. That would be great.
I have a question.
Pardon me?
I have a question.
Yeah.
To the mic.
If you just name and address for the recording.
Oh, it's Karen Palmer. So I have, what?
The light's on.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
it's on.
It's on.
It's on.
I have a question for Chris, but I could just ask you later about the math.
Go on, I want to hear it. It's
Should
okay.
I ask him?
No, do it later. Do it later. Thank you.
Okay, I'll spare you from the mathematical lesson. In terms of Councillor Richardson's comment about the relative urgency to figure out the coach house, so believing last time that we met that this would be imminent, we went ahead with paying for the wrapper, and now the next part of the riparian assessment is we have to hire an engineer to do a geotechnical assessment and an arborist to assess for trees. So before we do all of that, we would hope that we could have a little more guidance sooner rather than later on whether we should forget about this whole thing or whether we might be able to move ahead with it in the not too distant future. So just to add to that sense of urgency. Two thoughts I had about, as you were talking about density, I can see the next pressure would be for subdivision around down the road if we become a collection of 2 houses per lot. So I don't know if that works into any of your thinking, but it's not something that I'm thinking of doing, but I can see where there could be pressure for that down the road. And also, I think you have to address the Airbnb problem, that people turn coach houses into Airbnbs when we meant for them to be homes for our family members. So I don't know how you deal with Airbnb either, but I leave that in your capable hands. And just lastly on the trees. So last year we were lucky to receive one of the Fire Smart grants, which gave us $5,000 to Fire Smart our property, which was extraordinary. And I would encourage that somehow we figure out how to get more Fire Smart money, because the responsibility is on the homeowner finds a contractor, and the province pays for somebody to come and clear your trees. And lastly, we recently visited Orcas Island, well, a while back, but Orcas Island has somehow figured this out. There's no foliage on the ground. Like, they have cleaned up Orcas Island. I don't know what they did or how they did it, but you might want to ask them what they did to Fire Smart Orcas Island, because we could benefit from that. Thanks.
Okay, please, yeah.
I have several questions, and Nancy Maloney, 1724 East Road. And my first question is, would it be possible for the Village of Anmore to recognize June as Pride Month, like on the website and on the signage as people come into the village?
Yeah, absolutely. We normally do that, right?
But we're in Pride Month, but it hasn't happened. And related to that, could the village make a commitment to the principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion in all village business and activities, and also incorporate these principles in one of the village committees when they are eventually constituted? So many municipalities do this, like within the domain of a committee is equity, diversity, and inclusion as part of the mandate of one of the committees, but we have yet to step up to the plate to do that. Okay, and then related to this, I know it's probably not possible given that it has been, the allocations have been moved and approved, but would it be possible for either some of the recent windfall provincial funding or other dollars to be eventually used to install a rainbow crosswalk? I would suggest at the intersections of Strong and East Road, as many other municipalities have done, to demonstrate Anmore's commitment to these principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Thank you.
And my second question, who determines what correspondence received by the village is included in a council meeting agenda package, and what would be the criteria? And I ask this because I assume Anmore received a letter from the District of Coldstream dated May 9th. And the topic of the letter is the Home for People Action Provincial Plan. And they say that it was sent, to all municipalities. So we must have received this, but it never turned up in our minutes as correspondence. And would you like a copy of it? I can't believe that Anmore somehow got left out, but I guess it is possible.
So, through the mayor, I can answer the question. Typically, the corporate officer makes the decisions on what correspondence goes on the agenda for council. That particular item, I don't recall receiving it, and I just did a quick search through my email for Coldstream, and I have nothing in my inbox. So I'm not aware. Typically, in terms of criteria, correspondence that's received from other municipalities, we would typically include on the agenda. Other criteria that we use is something that is under the purview of local government. We would include on that as well.
I would be happy to share. And interestingly, it says that they had a motion that the letter sent to the Minister of Housing, copies to the MLA for Vernon-Monashee, and to all members of the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, which would include us. So somehow it seems like we had gotten left out. But
perhaps I can't comment other than I have not received the letter.
It's very interesting, so I'll give you guys a copy to share amongst each other. And very, very quickly here, bears are a current big issue in the village, as you probably already are aware, especially on the Friday, garbage and recycling and compostable pickup day. And it seems like lots of people have been communicating to each other about this, but somehow this issue needs to be better addressed before our bears start getting killed. I think it's there's lots of bear activity happening, and people are getting excited about this in the village. And very lastly, I wonder if our minutes could include greater detail, as is the case elsewhere. Otherwise, information that happens in our meetings actually gets lost. So compared to other municipalities, our minutes are very, very sparse, and sometimes the information is not strictly speaking correct. And as a personal example, my item at the committee of the whole is, minorly in error, but I think it would be preferable if our minutes were more detailed. And you could possibly look, say at Belcara's minutes, for example, which are considerably more detailed than the minutes for our meetings. Okay, thank you.
Lisa Johnston, 180 Hemlock Drive. Not a question, but a comment. I like your suggestion about honoring the Weinbergs before they depart, and I would be honored to work with you, whether we do something that coincides with Mulberry Day in September, or it's a community recognition of somebody that I think, whatever our opinions as communities as a whole, we do need to recognize somebody that's been here for an extreme long time and has contributed to the village. So I'd like to help you with that.
This is Jurgen Durkin on 1815A East Road. Jurgen Durkin, 1815A East Road. It's on the line of recognition as well. Through the chair, my question to the mayor is, before there's any development in Anmore South, should the village, in conjunction with Icona, acknowledge by means of ceremony and by public or social event the role of the indigenous people who first occupied the land?
I do not see the proposal. I can't comment on it. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just saying that would be actually an ideal situation.